Hi, we're here with Raphael Diluzio, and he's going to explain to us about his piece he submitted to Rewritable. Raphael, can you tell us about what your own personal definition of time-based art is?
Well, time-based media, in my opinion, is any sort of art or any sort of media that simply moves through time. So, for instance, you could say that early filmmaking was time-based media. Any sort of telemedia is time-based media. Any sort of medium that can be sampled and can be turned into binary code and adjusted over time is time-based media. For myself, I work with video and some animation.
Do you want to explain briefly the process that you went about in creating the three pieces you've submitted to Rewritable?
Well, the three pieces are, two of them are related to one another and one's very different. The process is sort of similar in each one. I was trained as a painter, so all my work has a real strong relation to painting. And I'm really interested in the work right now in trying to find a connection back to painting, which is why I'm calling these pieces digital, cinematic, time-based painting. They're meant to be seen on a surface, either projected onto a surface or on an LCD screen. I work really strongly from my own imagination, finding images and sequences that I build up and build in sort of poetic layers to try and create the overall image.
How do you feel about being included in Rewritable?
I think it's really exciting that a group of students is putting together something like this, a distributable, sort of rich media magazine, I guess you could call it, that's going to be on DVD and I guess have an attendant website. The two students who've been working hardest on it for the last year have been doing a great job, and it's really an exciting opportunity.
Raphael, what was your influences in creating these three pieces? Did it come from any one source, or what were those sources, and how did they affect the creation of the work?
One of the reasons I have you guys out here while we're doing this is that one of the greatest influences for me in time-based media is the world around us. Well, what's really exciting to me about this medium and what's so different is that before we created work like this, we were making fixed images. You know, for 500 years, artists were really locked into making fixed images and painting and photography and drawing. With the introduction of film, primarily, and the introduction of audio recording, we really were able to sample the world around us, and the world around us is moving. I mean, these plants are moving, ice in the water is moving, and that's how we really see and experience the world. We don't see the world in frozen moments. In modern times, we really experience the world not only just in movement, but because of the introduction of telemedia and cinematic process, we really see the world in terms of superimposition, in terms of montage, and in terms of like nonlinear narrative. So I guess my influences for the work are the world around me, strongly influenced by cinema. I love experimental cinema, you know, from the works of Maya Deren and other artists like that, to contemporary filmmakers and even, you know, early filmmakers like Dega Vertov and other cinematic pioneers. But I draw my influence from everything, from painting, from the kinds of things I see when I videotape the world around me, like this ice moving along the water over here, which is really kind of exciting, this sort of slow movement. All these kind of things we can draw from, and the real splendor of this medium is that we can really work with the way we naturally see and experience the world.
Great. I think symbolism, iconography, and synesthesia are things that you try to work with too. I've heard you talk about in the past. Is there anything you want to say about that?
I won't talk much about my symbols or my iconography for the pieces that you have. There's two works which I call the Chasing Ophelia works. One is Chasing Ophelia, and one is When the Child Was a Child, He Dreamed of These Things, which is a line from a Rainer Maria Rilke poem. Both are centered around the image of a boy on one of those rocking horses. And they're really about, I mean, it's pretty direct in terms of how the symbols work. I'm more interested in how the viewer interprets the montage of symbols as they come together. The other piece, Stations, although in one sense overtly dealing with a lot of religious symbology, is not religious per se. I like to bring in a lot of symbolism. I think that iconography and symbol and the ways we see the world are really important, and that bringing together I guess as it were, as an artist, a sort of library or lexicon, a personal lexicon of image is really important because it allows us to speak about what's important to us, but moreover it allows the viewer to enter and interpret the work. One other thing that I thought might be important to say, which I really wanted to include in our discussion, is that I'm really interested in seeing the difference between what I see as two different types of eyes. I think that originally, before we developed a cinematic process, we had a silent eye. That was an eye that could read very easily narrative and fixed imagery from photographs, paintings, and drawings. We've transitioned in the last 100 years with the introduction of telemedia and cinematic process into the eye in time, with this idea of time-based media. And this eye in time is an eye that really is geared to seeing narrative as it moves through time, which is sort of obvious. I mean, when you read a story, you're not reading it in a fixed moment, you're reading the story through time. When you experience a play or music, you're experiencing the narrative through time. When you experience life, you experience the narrative of your life through time. What's curious is, we talk about linearity. Our lives are not linear. Of course, we wake up every day, we go to sleep every day, we're born and eventually we die. But we make many decisions during our lives. We go through many different variations of routine, many different variations of experience. And in one sense, I think this medium is really exciting because it's allowing us to more closely imitate how we really live our lives and how we really experience personal narrative.
I know rhythm is an important piece to time-based art, specifically video. You talked about the use of audio and music in your pieces.
Well, it's a funny thing because as a painter, I was always jealous of musicians. They got to play in bands, they got to be with other people. Music, as far as I'm concerned, is the highest art form there is. It's really the complete art form. It moves past the intellect and directly goes into, if we could call it this, into the soul and moves the viewer. Painting, as much as I love to paint and as much as I've always loved making paintings, doesn't do that for the viewer. They see it, they experience it, they move on. The wonderful thing about working with video is the audio side of it, and the fact that you don't just include audio with it. You don't just make things that are like music videos where the music supports the video, or the audio supports, or the video supports the audio, but really you could think of both parts as sharing relationships, whereas audio can have beat, rhythm, pulse, and syncopation. You can do the same thing with the video end. You can set up repetition patterns in terms of how you deal with image. You can set up visual kind of beat and visual kind of patterning. You can set up visual kind of dissonance and syncopation. This to me is really exciting when we can begin to build this kind of musicality in visual form, so there's a shared relationship. And conversely, can you get sound to have color? Can you get sound to have value and drama, dark and light, and the kind of things, even line or mark, the kind of things that image usually contains?
So synesthesia does directly influence your work.
Yeah, I mean, the term synesthesia, the works submitted here don't really have that. Stations came out of an installation originally, and the idea in the installation was that there was sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And there was, if not direct synesthesia, there was an involvement and engagement of all the senses. I think that I'm very interested in this process of combining either, on the simplest, the coarsest level of time-based media, the simplest level is sight and sound. To get all the things functioning together is good, and perhaps a process of synesthesia would occur. I know that synesthesia is an odd thing. I think we all, to some degree or another, experience it. There are people who are definitely synesthetes who really heavily experience it. I know that I always have, in terms of sound and image, had some sort of confusion. Sometimes when I hear sounds, I see colors. I don't know if this is my background and training as an artist, but I've always had this crossover between sound and vision.
Well, sounds great. I think that's all she wrote. Thank you very much.
Well, good luck with Rewritable, you guys. I'm really excited about this.